Part 1, the signal came through on a quiet Tuesday morning. Danny Harper was sitting at his station on the Europa colony, drinking coffee and watching the screens. He was a communications officer, and most days nothing exciting happened. Today was different. The computer started beeping. Danny put down his coffee and leaned forward. The translation program was working hard, turning alien words into English. What he saw made his heart beat faster. "Captain Morgan, you need to see this right now," Danny said into his headset. Lisa Morgan walked over quickly. She was the captain of the station, a tall woman with short brown hair and sharp eyes. She had been in space for 15 years and thought she had seen everything. She was wrong. The message played on the screen. It was broken up and hard to hear, but the meaning was clear. "This is the Valerian High Council. We are under attack. The Kretch are destroying our worlds. We need help. Please. We know about Earth. We know humans are strong. Please help us." Lisa felt cold. The Valerians were peaceful aliens. They were scholars and artists. They had been one of the first alien races to talk to humans 50 years ago. If they were asking humans for help, things must be very bad. "Get me Earth Command. Priority alert," Lisa ordered. Within minutes, Admiral Greg Patterson appeared on the screen. He was an older man with gray hair and a serious face. He worked at the Pentagon in the Space Operations Center. He listened to the message without saying anything. His face got harder with each word. "How much time do they have?" Greg asked. Danny did some quick math on his computer. "Maybe 3 days before their defenses fail completely." Greg nodded and turned to someone off-screen. "Alert the Third Fleet, every ship, every soldier. We leave immediately." Lisa spoke up. "Sir, the Valerian system is very far away. It will take us 6 weeks to get there, even at top speed." "I know, Captain," Greg said. His voice was firm. "That is why we are sending everything we have." All across Earth, the military machine woke up. From the space stations above America to the underwater bases in the Pacific Ocean, humanity prepared for war. Ships that had been docked for repairs were rushed back into service. Soldiers on leave were called back. Engineers worked double shifts to load weapons and supplies. The fleet that began to gather was massive. There were huge battleships with enough weapons to destroy cities. There were fast destroyers that could dance between enemy fire. There were troop carriers filled with Marines ready to fight. Every ship carried the symbol of Earth, a planet that aliens called a death world because of how dangerous it was. In Seattle, Marine Lieutenant Kate Sullivan was eating breakfast with her 7-year-old daughter when her phone buzzed. She looked at the message and knew what it meant. She kissed her daughter goodbye and promised to come home soon. Then she headed to the military transport station. This same scene happened all over the world. In Tokyo, London, Cairo, and Mexico City, soldiers said goodbye to their families. They came from different countries and spoke different languages, but they all understood the mission. Someone needed help, and Earth was going to answer. In Geneva, General Peter Collins stood in front of a huge star map. Next to him was Amanda Price, the chief strategist. She was pulling up information about the enemy. "The Kretch Dominion," Amanda said, reading from her files. "They are like insects. They work as a hive mind, very aggressive. They strip planets of all resources and then move on to the next world." Peter nodded. His face was grim. "They made a big mistake. They should not have attacked someone under our protection." The Third Fleet began to leave Earth's orbit. There were 96 ships in total, carrying tens of thousands of people. The ships moved into formation, then activated their faster-than-light drives. Blue and white light filled space as the fleet jumped away. On Earth, people watched the news. Everyone knew about the mission. Some people were worried. Space was dangerous and the enemy sounded terrible. But most people were proud. Humanity was going to help someone who needed it. On the ship called UES Vengeance, Commander Jake Matthews looked out at the stars. His ship was the biggest in the fleet, a battle carrier with 3,000 crew members. Jake was thinking about what was waiting for them at the end of their journey. He had read all the reports about the Kretch. They were brutal fighters who never gave up. They attacked in huge numbers and did not care about their own losses. They did not take prisoners. They did not negotiate. They just consumed everything in their path. In the medical bay, Dr. Henry Ross was setting up emergency stations. He had been a military doctor for 20 years. He knew what war looked like. He knew what it did to people. He made sure every piece of medical equipment was ready. He ran drills with his team. When the wounded started coming in, he wanted to be prepared. Down in the Marine section of the ship, Kate Sullivan was briefing her platoon. 45 Marines stood in front of her, all wearing their combat armor. She explained the mission. The Valerians cannot fight, Kate told them. They have almost no weapons. That is why they called us. When we arrive, our first job is to protect civilians and get them to safety. Our second job is to set up defenses. Our third job is to push the Kretch back. One Marine raised his hand. His name was Ryan Tucker. Ma'am, what can you tell us about fighting the Kretch? Kate showed them a video. It was grainy and dark, but clear enough. Bug-like creatures, each one 7 feet tall, were attacking a mining colony. They moved incredibly fast. They swarmed over the defenders like water over rocks. They are fast and they are mean, Kate said. They never stop coming. But they have never fought human Marines before. They are about to learn why Earth is called a death world. In the command ship, Admiral Patterson was meeting with his officers. He had come on this mission personally because it was too important to command from Earth. The Valerians sent us scans before their communications went dark, said Nicole Grant, the intelligence officer. They have 7 colony worlds. Most of their people live on Valara Prime. That is where the Kretch are attacking hardest. Greg looked at the tactical map. What about their space defenses? Almost nothing, Nicole said. The Valerians never built a military. They thought being peaceful would keep them safe. That plan just failed, Greg said. What about the Kretch fleet? Nicole highlighted enemy ships on the map. At least 200 combat ships. Everything from small fighters to huge capital ships. They have blockaded Valara Prime and are bombing it from orbit. The room was quiet. Everyone was thinking the same thing. 200 ships was a lot. But the human fleet was built for war. Every ship was designed to fight and win. We will break their blockade, Greg said. Fast and hard. Our fighters will punch through their lines while the big ships provide cover. Once we control the space around the planet, we land the Marines and start evacuating civilians. In the fighter bay, pilot Samantha Cole was checking her ship for the 100th time. Her interceptor was called Raptor 7. It was fast and deadly, armed with plasma cannons and torpedoes. Around her, other pilots were doing the same thing. How are you feeling, Sam? Asked her wingman Eric Stone over the radio. Ready, Samantha replied. You? Just hoping these bugs do not like the taste of plasma, Eric said with a laugh. Days turned into weeks. The fleet raced through space toward the Valerian system. The crew trained every day to stay sharp. At first, everyone was nervous. But as time passed, nervousness turned into determination. Late at night, when most people were sleeping, Jake Matthews would stand alone and look at the stars. He thought about what they were doing. Humanity had fought wars before. Wars over land, over resources, over old hatreds. But this was different. This time, humanity was answering a cry for help from strangers. They were traveling across the galaxy to fight an enemy that had never threatened Earth. It was, Jake thought, maybe the most human thing they had ever done. The fleet continued on through the darkness of space, racing toward a world under siege. Behind them, Earth waited and hoped. Ahead of them, an entire civilization prayed for salvation. And somewhere in the cold depths of space, an enemy that had never lost a battle waited, unaware that they were about to face something they had never encountered before. Humans from a death world, coming to save the innocent and punish the guilty. Part 2. 3 days into the journey, Commander Jake Matthews stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance. Through the large window, he could see the strange sight of hyperspace. Stars stretched into long lines of light. It was beautiful and strange at the same time. Status report, Jake said to his crew. Lieutenant Chris Baker looked up from his station. All ships are in formation, sir. The engines are working at 98%. We are making good time. Jake nodded, but his mind was somewhere else. In his room, he had studied everything they knew about the Kretch. None of it was good. The Kretch fought like angry bees from a kicked hive. They came in huge numbers and never stopped attacking. They did not take prisoners. They did not show mercy. To them, other species were just food and resources. Down in the medical bay, Dr. Henry Ross was preparing for the worst. He had been a combat surgeon for many years. He remembered the Titan Rebellion 15 years ago. He had seen what modern weapons could do to the human body. Now he was making sure his medical bay was ready for anything. He trained his staff hard. Every piece of equipment had to be perfect. Several levels below in the Marine barracks, Kate Sullivan was talking to her platoon. 45 Marines in combat armor stood at attention. She was explaining what they would face. The Valerians are peaceful, Kate said loudly so everyone could hear. They have almost no military. That is why they called us. When we get there, our first job is evacuation. We get the civilians out. Our second job is defense. We protect them. Our third job is to push the Kretch back. Corporal Ryan Tucker raised his hand. Ma'am, what do we know about fighting the Kretch? Kate pulled up a video on the big screen. The Marines watched in silence. The footage was dark and grainy but clear enough. Insect-like creatures, each one nearly 7 feet tall, were swarming over a mining colony. They moved so fast it was hard to follow. They climbed walls, jumped over barriers, and overwhelmed the defenders through sheer numbers. They are fast, aggressive, and they do not stop, Kate said plainly. But they have never faced human Marines. They are about to learn what that means. In the fleet's main command ship, Admiral Greg Patterson was having a meeting with his senior officers. He had insisted on coming on this mission himself. Some things were too important to command from far away. The Valerians sent us detailed information about their system before their communication stopped, said Commander Nicole Grant. She was the intelligence chief. They have 7 colony worlds. The main population is on Valara Prime. That is where the Kretch are focusing their attack. Greg studied the 3-dimensional map floating in front of him. What about their orbital defenses? Very minimal, Nicole admitted. The Valerians never thought they needed a strong military. They relied on diplomacy and their neutral status to stay safe. That strategy just got them invaded, Greg said quietly. What is the Kretch fleet size? Nicole made some ships light up on the map. We are detecting at least 200 combat vessels. Small fighters all the way up to capital ships. They have created a blockade around Valara Prime. They are bombing the planet from orbit. Everyone in the room was quiet. 200 ships was a serious threat. But the human Third Fleet had 96 warships. Each one was built specifically for combat. Humanity had learned hard lessons about war throughout its history. Those lessons were built into every ship. We need to break their blockade, Admiral Patterson said, fast and violent. I want our fighters to create a hole in their formation. The big ships will provide covering fire. Once we control the space around the planet, we land the Marines and begin evacuation. In the fighter bay of the UES Vengeance, Samantha Cole was running checks on her ship again. Her interceptor was called Raptor 7. It was a sleek machine designed for one purpose, destroying enemy ships. It had plasma cannons and quantum torpedoes. Around her in the huge bay, dozens of other pilots were doing the same thing. How are you holding up, Sam? Asked Lieutenant Eric Stone. He was her wingman. They had flown together for 3 years. As ready as I will ever be, Samantha said, checking her weapons one more time. You? Just hoping the Kretch tastes good with plasma sauce, Eric joked. But his voice was tight. He was nervous too. Days became weeks. The fleet maintained its fast pace toward the Valerian system. Every day the crew trained. They ran combat drills. They practiced emergency procedures. They checked and rechecked their equipment. The mood on the ship slowly changed. At first people were anxious and worried. Now they were focused and determined. Some of the crew had never seen combat before. They were scared but did not show it. The veterans, those who had fought in previous conflicts, tried to calm the newer members. They told stories. They shared advice. They built unit cohesion. In the rec rooms during off-duty hours, soldiers talked about home. They showed pictures of their families. They talked about what they would do when they got back to Earth. Some wrote letters to loved ones just in case something happened. Others prayed to whatever gods they believed in. The ship's chaplain, a man named Paul Martinez, was busy. People came to him with their fears and doubts. He listened and offered comfort. He did not have all the answers, but sometimes people just needed someone to listen. In the strategy room, Amanda Price was working with a team of tacticians. They were planning for different scenarios. What if the Kretch had more ships than expected? What if the Valerian defenses had already collapsed? What if there were Kretch ground forces already on the planet? For each possibility, they created a response plan. The biggest unknown is how the Kretch will react to us, Amanda said to her team. They have been expanding through this region for years. From what we know, they have never encountered serious resistance. They are used to easy victories. One of the tacticians, a young woman named Beth Harper, spoke up. So they might underestimate us? Possibly, Amanda agreed. But we cannot count on that. We plan for them being smart and adaptable. Anything less would be foolish. Meanwhile, down in the engineering sections, crews were working hard to keep the ships running at peak performance. Chief Engineer Carl Jensen barely slept. He moved from section to section, checking systems, fixing problems before they became critical, and pushing his people to maintain the impossible pace. The quantum drives are operating beyond their normal parameters, Carl told Commander Matthews during a briefing.
We are pushing them hard.
But they will hold. We will get you there on time. Jake clapped the older man on the shoulder. I know you will, Carl. Just keep them running for 6 more weeks. 6 weeks there, then however long the battle takes, then 6 weeks back, Carl corrected. Do not worry, Commander. These ships were built tough, just like the people who fly them. In the troop carriers, Marines were training in the mock-up combat zones. These were rooms that could be configured to look like different environments. The Marines practiced urban combat, moving through destroyed buildings and rubble. They practiced defending positions against waves of simulated enemies. They practiced evacuating civilians under fire. Kate Sullivan pushed her people hard. She knew that training saved lives. Every drill, every exercise, every repetition built muscle memory. In combat, there was no time to think. You just reacted. Training made sure those reactions were the right ones. Again, Kate would say after each drill. Faster this time. The Kretsch will not wait for you to get organized. Some of the younger Marines grumbled, but they did as ordered. They trusted Lieutenant Sullivan. She had been in combat before. She knew what she was talking about. At night, in the quiet hours when the ship operated on minimal crew, Jake Matthews would sometimes talk with other senior officers. They would share a drink in one of the small officer lounges and talk about life, duty, and what they were about to face. Do you think we will get there in time? Asked Commander Stevens, captain of one of the destroyers. We have to, Jake replied simply. The alternative is unacceptable. The Valerians are not allies, Stevens pointed out. We have no treaty with them. No trade agreements. We barely know them. Yet here we are, rushing across the galaxy to save them. Jake looked at his drink, then at Stevens. Does that matter? They asked for help. We can provide it. That is enough, Stevens smiled slightly. Spoken like a true human. Any other species would have calculated the cost versus benefit, weighed the political implications. But not us. Someone needs help, so we help them. It is almost stupid. Maybe, Jake agreed. But it is who we are, and I would not have it any other way. Back in the fighter bay, Samantha Cole was sitting in her cockpit even though they were still weeks from the target. She was not running checks this time. She was just sitting, feeling the ship around her, preparing mentally for what was coming. She thought about her training, years of it. Learning to fly, learning to fight, learning to survive. She thought about the other pilots in her squadron. Good people, all of them. She would do everything she could to bring them home alive. Her radio crackled. Sam, you in there? It was Eric. Yeah, just thinking. Want some company? Sure. A few minutes later, Eric climbed up to sit on her fighter's wing. They sat in silence for a while, just two friends preparing for battle. You scared? Eric asked eventually. Terrified, Samantha admitted. But I will do my job anyway. That is all anyone can ask. They sat there for a while longer. Part 3, the Third Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Valerian system. What they saw made everyone go silent. My God, Chris Baker whispered from his station. The main screen showed destruction on a scale that was hard to believe. Debris floated everywhere. Pieces of orbital stations, destroyed cargo ships, and the twisted remains of Valerian defense platforms drifted through space like a graveyard. In the distance, Valara Prime hung against the darkness. The planet that should have been blue and green was covered in smoke and fire. Scan for survivors, Admiral Patterson ordered. His voice was calm, but everyone could hear the anger beneath it. Sir, I am detecting multiple Kretsch signatures, Nicole Grant reported. 230 vessels, just like we estimated. They are concentrated in high orbit over the main continent. What about the Valerians? Nicole's face was grim. Life signs on the planet, but they are scattered and getting weaker. I am also detecting what looks like a refugee convoy trying to escape to the outer planets. Greg made his decision instantly. Split the fleet. Battle Group Alpha comes with me. We engage the Kretsch blockade. Battle Group Beta. Under Commander Matthews, you intercept and protect that refugee convoy. Move out now. The fleet split apart smoothly. 50 ships accelerated toward Valara Prime. The other 46 turned toward the fleeing civilian ships. On the UES Vengeance, Jake Matthews watched his battle group approach the refugee convoy. As they got closer, his heart sank. The Valerian ships were civilian transports. They had no weapons. Some were damaged in trailing atmosphere. Behind them, like wolves chasing sheep, 20 Kretch hunter ships were closing in. All fighters, launch immediately, Jake commanded. Protect those transports. Samantha Cole felt the familiar push as her interceptor was catapulted from the launch bay into space. Around her, 40 human fighters deployed. Their engines burned bright blue against the black. Raptor Squadron, form up on me, Samantha called over the radio. Let's teach these bugs a lesson about picking on civilians. The Kretch hunters saw the human fighters coming. They turned to meet this new threat. For a moment, the two forces raced toward each other, closing the distance at incredible speed. Then the battle began. Samantha fired her plasma cannons. Blue-white bolts shot across space and hit the lead Kretch fighter. The alien ship's shields flared bright, then failed. The ship exploded in a ball of fire. Around her, the other human pilots fired too. The space between the two forces lit up with weapons fire, but the Kretch were not easy targets. They moved with strange coordination, their ships weaving and spinning in patterns that seemed impossible. They shot back with bioweapons that fired streams of green acid. When it hit human ships, it started eating through the armor. Raptor 3 is hit, Eric Stone shouted. One of their squadron members was spinning out of control. Part of his wing was melted away. He is ejecting. Samantha gritted her teeth and pushed her ship harder. She locked onto another Kretch fighter and fired a quantum torpedo. The missile streaked forward and the Kretch ship vanished in a flash of light. But for every enemy ship she destroyed, more appeared. The fight was brutal and fast. Ships exploded. Debris scattered. Human pilots used every trick they knew, but the Kretch fought with mindless aggression. They did not care about their own losses. They just kept attacking. Meanwhile, at Valara Prime, Admiral Patterson's battle group crashed into the Kretch blockade like a hammer hitting glass. The UES Defiant led the charge. It was a massive battle carrier, bigger than 3 football fields. Its main cannons fired in sequence. Each shot was powerful enough to destroy a small ship completely. Admiral Patterson stood on the bridge, watching his fleet tear through the enemy formation. Target their capital ships first, Greg ordered. I want those bombardment vessels destroyed before they can do more damage to the planet. The battle was chaos. Hundreds of ships fought in the space above the planet. Weapons fire filled the darkness like deadly fireworks. The Kretch fought desperately. When their weapons failed, they rammed their ships into human vessels, sacrificing themselves without hesitation. But humanity had learned to fight wars on Earth, where every advantage had to be earned through blood. Their ships were built tougher. Their weapons hit harder. Their tactics were smarter. Slowly, the Kretch blockade started to break apart. The human destroyers moved like sharks through the battle. They were fast and deadly, using their speed to get behind enemy ships and hit their weak points. The battle carriers stayed back, using their long-range weapons to destroy the big Kretch capital ships. Enemy flagship detected, Nicole Grant called out. It is that big, organic-looking ship at the center of their formation. Greg saw it on the screen. The Kretch flagship was enormous and looked more like a living creature than a ship. It pulsed with strange bioluminescent light. All ships focus fire on that target, Greg commanded. 20 human ships turned their weapons on the enemy flagship. Plasma bolts, missiles, and energy beams all hit at once. The Kretch ship's shields held for a moment, then collapsed. The ship's organic hull began to rupture. Atmosphere and fluid sprayed into space. Then it exploded, and the blast wave destroyed several nearby Kretch vessels. With their flagship gone, the Kretch formation began to fall apart. The aliens were still fighting, but they had lost coordination. Human ships pressed the advantage, destroying enemy vessels one after another. On the surface of Valara Prime in a deep underground bunker, Chancellor Dre of the Valerian High Council watched the battle on a flickering screen. The old alien's 4 eyes were wide with disbelief. They came, Dre whispered. His translator device turned his words into English. The humans actually came. Next to him stood Science Minister Kella. She was trembling with exhaustion, but also relief. I told you they would. Despite what others say about them, despite the fear, humans have something rare. They have honor. Above them, the battle raged. The sounds of orbital combat shook the bunker's walls. But for the first time in weeks, the Valerians felt hope. Back in space, Jake Matthews was coordinating the protection of the refugee convoy. His battle group had destroyed most of the Kretch hunters, but a few were still fighting. The civilian transports were now surrounded by human warships. "Get those transports moving," Jake ordered. "Take them to the outer system where they will be safe." Human destroyers formed a protective screen around the Valerian civilians. Fighters flew patrol patterns, watching for more enemies. Slowly, carefully, the convoy began moving away from the combat zone. One of the Valerian transport captains sent a message. It came through the translation system in a shaky voice. "Thank you. Thank you for saving us. We thought no one would come." Jake felt something tighten in his chest. "You are safe now. We will protect you." The battle for orbital space continued for hours. The Kretch fought with desperate fury, but they were losing. Human ships were stronger, better armed, and better commanded. More importantly, human crews knew why they were fighting. They were protecting the innocent. That gave them something the Kretch did not have: purpose beyond simple conquest. One by one, the Kretch ships were destroyed or driven off. Some tried to flee, but human fighters chased them down. Admiral Patterson had given clear orders: do not let any escape, to regroup and return. By the end of the day, the space around Valara Prime was secure. The Kretch blockade was broken. Debris floated everywhere, but no more enemy ships threatened the planet. On the bridge of the UES Defiant, Admiral Patterson allowed himself a small smile. Phase 1 complete. Begin Phase 2. Land the Marines. Start evacuation operations. Get every survivor off that planet and to safety. All across the fleet, drop pods were loaded with Marines. Medical ships moved into position. Transport vessels prepared to shuttle civilians to safety. The battle for space was won, but the war was not over. On the planet below, the Kretch had landed ground forces. Thousands of the insect warriors were on the surface, killing and destroying. Now it was time for the human Marines to do what they did best. Kate Sullivan stood in her drop pod with her platoon. The pod was cramped and uncomfortable. Through the small window, she could see Valara Prime getting closer. The planet looked wounded, with fires burning across entire continents. "Check your weapons," Kate ordered. "Check your seals. Check your ammunition. When those doors open, we hit the ground running." Around her, Marines made final preparations. Some prayed. Some checked their gear one more time. Some just stared at nothing, getting into the mental state needed for combat. The drop pods launched. Kate felt the acceleration push her back against the restraints. The pod shook violently as it entered the atmosphere. Through the window, she could see the heat shield glowing red, then white. The pod was surrounded by fire. Then came the impact. The pod hit the ground hard enough to rattle her teeth. The front panel exploded outward. Kate charged out into smoke and ruins. Her platoon followed right behind her. They had arrived on Valara Prime. The real fight was about to begin. Part 4. Kate Sullivan's boots hit the ground running. Around her, the ruins of a Valerian city burned. Buildings that had once been beautiful now lay in pieces. Smoke filled the air. Bodies of Valerian civilians were scattered in the streets. The destruction was complete and terrible. "Spread out and move forward," Kate ordered her platoon. "Watch for movement. The Kretch are here somewhere." The Marines fanned out in a tactical formation. They moved carefully through the rubble, weapons ready. Every shadow could hide an enemy. Every pile of debris could be an ambush point. Ryan Tucker was on point, leading the way. He turned a corner and froze. "Contact front. Multiple hostiles." From the ruins ahead, Kretch warriors emerged. There were at least 20 of them. Each one was massive, standing 7 feet tall on 6 legs. Their bodies were covered in hard black shells that looked like armor. Their heads had multiple eyes and huge mandibles that clicked together. They carried weapons that looked like they had been grown instead of built. "Open fire," Kate shouted. The street exploded with gunfire. The Marines shot in controlled bursts, their training taking over. The high-velocity rounds from their rifles tore into the Kretch. Green blood sprayed. Several of the aliens fell, their shells cracked and broken. But the Kretch did not stop. They charged forward with terrifying speed, scrambling over their own dead. They made horrible shrieking sounds as they attacked. Kate switched her rifle to full automatic. She poured rounds into the approaching swarm. Around her, her platoon did the same. The noise was deafening. Empty shell casings rained down on the ground. The air smelled like gunpowder and burning metal. "Grenades!" Kate yelled. The Marines threw grenades into the Kretch formation. The explosions tore huge gaps in their ranks. Body parts flew through the air. But still more Kretch kept coming from the ruins. Ryan Tucker found himself face to face with one of the warriors. It leaped at him, mandibles snapping. Ryan blocked with his rifle, then pulled his combat knife. He drove the blade into one of the creature's eyes. The Kretch shrieked and fell, twitching on the ground. "Keep moving," Kate commanded. "Do not let them surround us." The platoon fought their way forward, street by street. More Kretch appeared. Some came from buildings. Some climbed out of sewers. Some dropped from ruined upper floors. The aliens were everywhere, but the human Marines were trained for exactly this kind of fighting. They used the rubble for cover. They supported each other with overlapping fields of fire. They moved as a unit, protecting each other's backs. After 20 minutes of intense combat, the area was clear. Dead Kretch littered the streets. The Marines had taken some casualties too. 3 wounded, none dead so far. The medics were already working on the injured. "Corporal Tucker, take your fire team and start clearing buildings," Kate ordered. "Look for Valerian survivors. Anyone you find, bring them to the extraction point." "Yes, ma'am," Ryan replied. He and 4 other Marines moved toward the nearest intact building. They entered carefully, weapons up. The inside was dark and damaged. Furniture was overturned. Personal belongings were scattered everywhere. "Signs of a hasty evacuation. Hello?" Ryan called out in English. His helmet had a translator that would convert his words. "Any Valerians here?" "We are human Marines. We are here to help." At first there was nothing. Then they heard a sound from below. Something in the basement. The Marines moved down the stairs carefully. At the bottom they found a hidden room. Inside were 15 Valerians huddled together. Several adults and some younglings. The aliens looked terrified. They had 4 eyes each and slender bodies. Their skin was pale blue. When they saw the armored Marines, they pushed the younglings behind them protectively. Ryan removed his helmet so they could see his face. "We are friends," he said gently. "We came from Earth. We are here to protect you." One of the Valerians, an older male, stepped forward. "Earth, the Death World? You came all this way for us?" "Yes," Ryan said simply. "Come with us. We will take you somewhere safe." The Valerians followed the Marines back to the street. Kate saw them and immediately called for transport. A human dropship swooped down, landing in a clear area. The Valerians were loaded aboard. The ship took off, heading for the evacuation ships in orbit. This scene was repeated across the city. Dozens of Marine platoons were searching buildings and rescuing civilians. Every Valerian they found was sent up to the ships. The evacuation was working, but it was slow and dangerous. Chancellor Dre was among a group of survivors found in a government bunker. When Kate's platoon reached him, the old leader looked at the human Marines with wonder and gratitude. "You came," he said, his voice shaking. "You actually came." Kate helped him to his feet. "Yes, sir. We are here to help." "Why?" Dry asked. "We are not your allies. We have no treaty. Why would you risk your people for us?" Kate looked at the old alien for a moment. Around them her Marines were helping wounded Valerians and preparing them for evacuation. "Because you asked," she said finally. "Because it was the right thing to do. That is reason enough." Dre stared at her. "The galaxy fears your kind. They call you Deathworlders. They say humans are violent and dangerous. We can be," Kate admitted, "when we need to be. But we choose when to use that violence. Right now we choose to use it to protect you." As the ground evacuation continued, more human forces landed. Soon there were thousands of Marines on the planet. They set up defensive perimeters around the evacuation zones. They cleared the Kretch from the cities. They hunted down any aliens that tried to attack the civilians. The Kretch fought with desperate fury. They seemed to realize they were losing. They attacked in larger and larger groups, throwing everything they had at the human positions. But the Marines held their ground. In one battle, Kate's platoon was defending an evacuation point when over 100 Kretch attacked at once. The aliens came from 3 directions, trying to overwhelm the position through sheer numbers. "Hold the line," Kate shouted. "Do not let them through." The Marines formed a defensive circle around the civilians waiting for transport. Their rifles fired continuously. Kretch fell in waves, but more kept coming. The Marines threw grenades. They used their heavy weapons. They fixed bayonets for close combat when the aliens got too close. The battle lasted for 30 brutal minutes. When it was over, all of the Kretch were dead. The Marines had held, but they had paid a price. 5 dead, 12 wounded. Kate stood among the bodies of her people and felt the weight of command. But there was no time to grieve. More civilians needed rescuing. More Kretch needed killing. The mission continued. High in orbit, Admiral Patterson was coordinating the entire operation. The evacuation ships were filling up with refugees. Medical ships were treating thousands of wounded. The fleet's resources were being pushed to their limits. How many have we evacuated so far? Greg asked. Nearly 200,000, Nicole Grant reported. But there are still hundreds of thousands more scattered across the planet. Greg nodded grimly. Keep it going. We do not leave until every last Valerian is safe. Meanwhile, Commander Jake Matthews was leading a strike team with a special mission. They had located the main Kretch command ship, a huge organic vessel that had landed on the planet's surface. Intelligence suggested that the Kretch Queen was inside, controlling all the alien forces through a hive mind. If they could kill the Queen, the entire Kretch attack would collapse. Jake's team approached the bioship carefully. It was enormous, easily the size of a skyscraper. Its surface pulsed with sickly light. Entrance passages looked like open wounds and flesh. This is the most disgusting thing I've ever seen, Eric Stone muttered. Stay focused, Jake ordered. We go in, we find the Queen, we kill it, we get out. They entered the ship. Inside was worse than outside. The corridors were made of living tissue. The walls moved and breathed. Strange fluids dripped from the ceiling. The air was thick and hard to breathe even through their filters. They encountered Kretch warriors inside. The fighting was close and brutal. In the narrow corridors, there was no room for tactics. It was just raw combat. The humans pushed forward, leaving dead aliens behind them. After an hour of fighting, they reached the central chamber. It was a huge space, like being inside the stomach of some giant creature. And in the center was the Queen. She was massive, 20 feet tall. Her body was a grotesque mix of insect and plant features. She had dozens of limbs and hundreds of eyes. When she saw the humans, she made a sound that was like a scream and a roar combined. Kretch warriors poured from hidden chambers. Jake's team found themselves surrounded. Take them down, Jake shouted. The chamber filled with weapons fire. Humans and Kretch fought in a desperate melee. The Queen herself attacked, using her huge limbs to swat at the humans like they were insects. Jake rolled under one of her attacks and came up running. He had a plasma charge in his hand. He ran directly at the Queen, dodging her limbs, ignoring the warriors trying to stop him. He got close, shoved the charge into what looked like a nerve cluster, and activated it. The explosion was contained but powerful. The Queen shrieked and collapsed. Her limbs twitched and then went still. Instantly, the effect was felt across the entire planet. The Kretch warriors stopped fighting. They seemed confused, lost. Without the Queen's hive mind controlling them, they were just individuals with no purpose. The human forces quickly moved in, and Part 5. The sun rose over Valara Prime on the 4th day after the human fleet arrived. The planet was scarred and wounded, but it was still standing. Fires had been put out. The Kretch were gone. Human engineers were already helping to restore power to the cities. Kate Sullivan stood on a pile of rubble, looking out over what remained of the capital city. Her armor was dirty and dented. She had not slept more than a few hours in the past 4 days. But the mission was done. The Valerians were safe. Chancellor Dre approached her slowly. The old alien leader was using a walking stick. He had been injured during the attack but refused to leave until all his people were accounted for. Lieutenant Sullivan, he said quietly. His translator turned his words into English.
May I speak with you?
Kate turned and nodded. Of course, Chancellor. Dre looked out at the ruined city. When we sent that distress call, I did not truly believe anyone would come. We sent it to 7 different civilizations. Only humanity responded. Kate did not know what to say to that. It made her angry that others had ignored the call for help, but she just nodded. Do you know why the others did not come? Dry asked. They were afraid. Afraid of the Kretch, yes, but also afraid of what helping us might cost them. Resources, ships, lives. They calculated the price and decided it was too high. Then they made the wrong choice, Kate said simply. Yes, Dre agreed. But you did not calculate. You did not weigh the cost. You just came. Why? Kate thought about it for a moment. Because someone needed help. Because we could provide it. What other reason do we need? Dry studied her with his 4 eyes. The galaxy fears humans. They call your world a death world. They say it is one of the most dangerous planets in existence. They say it made you into warriors and killers. Kate looked at him. Earth is dangerous. It made us strong. It made us fighters. But it also taught us something else. What? Compassion, Kate said. When you grow up fighting to survive, you understand what suffering means. You understand what it means to need help. So when others suffer, when others need help, you cannot just turn away. Dre was quiet for a long moment. Then he placed a hand on Kate's shoulder. The galaxy sees your strength and your violence. They do not see your heart. That is their mistake. Over the next week, the human fleet remained in the Valerian system. Engineers helped rebuild critical infrastructure. Medical teams treated thousands of wounded civilians. Supply ships brought food, water, and medicine from Earth. Dr. Henry Ross worked around the clock in the field hospitals. He performed surgery after surgery, saving lives that would have been lost. The Valerian doctors worked alongside him, learning and helping. Despite the physical differences between species, Henry found that medicine was universal. Pain was pain. Healing was healing. One day, a young Valerian doctor approached him. She was holding something in her hands. It was a crystal that caught the light and made beautiful patterns. "Dr. Ross," she said through her translator, "I want you to have this." Henry looked at the crystal. "I cannot accept gifts for doing my job." "My daughter was crushed in the rubble when the Kretsch attacked," the doctor said. Her voice was shaking. "You operated on her for 7 hours. You saved her life. Please take this." Henry accepted the crystal. He felt its weight in his hand. "What is your daughter's name?" "Mira," the doctor replied. "Then I accept this gift in her honor," Henry said. "And I am glad I was here to help." In orbit, Admiral Patterson and Chancellor Dre were having formal meetings about the future. The Valerian High Council wanted to establish a permanent alliance with Earth. They wanted to learn how to defend themselves. They wanted humanity's help to rebuild. "We are willing to provide military training," Greg said, "technology transfers, strategic partnerships, but we will not turn you into us. You are a peaceful people. That is valuable. We will help you stay that way while also giving you the tools to protect yourselves." "What do you want in return?" Dry asked. He had learned enough about politics to know that nothing was free. Greg smiled. "Friendship, trade, cultural exchange, a mutual defense pact so that if either of our peoples are attacked, the other will help. That is all?" Dre looked surprised. "You do not want territory? Resources? Control over our government?" "No," Greg said firmly. "We came here to save you, not to conquer you. There is a difference." Over the following days, formal agreements were signed. The Valerian High Council and the Earth government established the first mutual defense treaty between their species. Trade agreements followed. Plans for cultural exchanges were made. Scientists from both species began talking about cooperative research projects. But more importantly, a bond of trust had been formed. The Valerians had called for help and humanity had answered. That simple act created a relationship that political treaties could never build alone. On the day before the fleet was scheduled to leave, a ceremony was held in the largest intact plaza in the capital. Thousands of Valerians gathered. All of the human military personnel who could be spared attended. It was a ceremony to honor the fallen and to thank the living. Chancellor Dre stood at a podium. His words were broadcast across the planet and sent back to Earth. 50 years ago, when humanity first reached the stars, many of us were afraid. Here was a species from a death world, a species that had evolved as hunters and fighters. We watched from a distance and worried about what you might become. He paused and looked at the assembled humans. But when our darkest hour came, when we faced extinction, you did not hesitate. You traveled across the galaxy. You fought for people you did not know. You died protecting us. We will never forget this. The crowd of Valerians began making a sound. It took the humans a moment to realize it was applause in their culture. A sort of humming that grew louder and louder. Admiral Patterson was invited to speak. He stepped up to the podium, somewhat uncomfortable with the attention but understanding its importance. "We did not come here seeking glory or recognition," Greg said. "We came because someone asked for help and we could provide it. Yes, Earth is a harsh world. It made us strong. It made us fighters. But it also taught us the value of cooperation and compassion. We hope that our actions inspire others to do the same when someone is in need." The ceremony continued for hours. Names of the fallen were read, both human and Valerian. Medals were awarded. Promises were made, and slowly, the two species began to truly see each other as friends and allies. Kate Sullivan received a commendation for her actions during the ground combat. She stood at attention as Admiral Patterson pinned the medal to her uniform. But what she would remember most was not the ceremony or the medal. It was the Valerian children who came up to her afterward, wanting to touch her armor and ask questions through their translators. "Are you a real warrior?" one youngling asked. Kate knelt down to the child's level. "I am a Marine. That means I protect people who cannot protect themselves." "Will you teach us to be strong like you?" another child asked. Kate smiled. "You are already strong. You survived. Now you will rebuild. That takes a different kind of strength. But yes, if you want to learn to defend yourselves, we will teach you." Samantha Cole spent her last day on Valara Prime with some of the other pilots. A group of Valerian younglings had been staring at the human fighters with wide eyes. Samantha and Eric invited them over for a closer look. They showed the younglings the cockpit, explained how the weapons worked, and described what it was like to fly in space. The children listened with fascination. Samantha could see the wonder in their eyes. Maybe some of them would become pilots one day, protecting their own people. Dr. Henry Ross spent his final hours training the Valerian medical staff. He shared everything he knew about trauma surgery and emergency medicine. The Valerian doctors were quick learners. Henry felt confident they would be able to handle future emergencies. Before he left, the Valerian chief medical officer gave him a gift. It was a data storage device containing all of Valerian medical knowledge, so that our peoples can learn from each other, the alien doctor explained. Henry accepted it with gratitude. Medical science should be shared. It benefits everyone. On the morning the fleet was scheduled to leave, something unexpected happened. Hundreds of Valerian civilian ships gathered in orbit. They formed two long lines, creating a corridor through space. As the human fleet began moving toward the jump point, the Valerian ships activated their lights. The corridor became a tunnel of brilliant colors. Blues, greens, purples, and golds all swirled together in beautiful patterns. It was a farewell ceremony, a display of gratitude and friendship. The human crews watched in awe as their ships passed through the tunnel of light. On the bridge of the UES Vengeance, Jake Matthews felt emotion tighten his throat. War was terrible. Combat was brutal. But moments like this made it worthwhile. They had saved an entire civilization. They had made friends across the stars. They had proven that humanity's strength could be used for good. "All ships," came Admiral Patterson's voice over the fleet channel. "Set course for Earth, let's go home." The fleet jumped to hyperspace. Behind them, Valara Prime began its long recovery. The cities would be rebuilt. The population would grow again. And the children who had been saved would grow up telling stories about the day the humans came from across the galaxy to rescue them. The journey home took 6 weeks, just like. Part 6, the UES Vengeance docked at the orbital station above Earth. Through the windows, Jake Matthews could see his homeworld. The blue oceans, the green and brown continents, the white clouds. After 3 months in space, it looked more beautiful than ever. The crew was tired but happy. They had done something important. They had saved an entire civilization from extinction. As they disembarked, many of them were met by family members who had been waiting. There were tears, hugs, and laughter. Kate Sullivan stepped off the transport ship and saw her daughter waiting with her parents. The little girl ran forward and Kate caught her, lifting her up and holding her tight. For a moment, all the stress and danger of the mission melted away. She was home. "Mommy, everyone at school says you are a hero," her daughter said. Kate smiled and shook her head. "I just did my job, sweetheart. The news says you saved a whole planet full of aliens." "I had a lot of help," Kate replied. "A lot of very brave people worked together. That is how we succeeded." Over the next week, there were parades in major cities around the world. New York, London, Tokyo, Mumbai, and dozens of other places held ceremonies to honor the returning soldiers. But the real story was happening quietly in homes across Earth, as soldiers reunited with their families and tried to return to normal life. Samantha Cole went back to her apartment. It felt strange to sleep in a real bed again after months on a ship. She stood on her balcony looking up at the stars and thought about the battle, about the friends she had lost, about the Valerian children who had looked at her fighter with wonder. Eric Stone called her on the second day back. "How are you adjusting?" "It is weird," Samantha admitted. "Everything seems so normal here, like the war never happened." "But it did happen. People died." "I know," Eric said quietly. "I have been having trouble sleeping. Keep thinking about the battle." "Me too." They talked for a while, two pilots trying to process what they had experienced. Eventually, they decided to meet up. Sometimes the only people who could understand were those who had been there. Dr. Henry Ross returned to his position at the main military hospital. But he found himself thinking constantly about the Valerian doctors he had trained. He started a program to translate Valerian medical knowledge into human terms. If their peoples were going to be allies, they should share medical advances that could save lives. One day he received a message from Valara Prime. It was from the young doctor whose daughter he had saved. The message included a video of the little girl Mira playing and healthy. Henry watched it 3 times, feeling grateful that he had been there to help. Admiral Greg Patterson was called to testify before the United Earth Congress. Politicians wanted to know about the mission, the costs, and the benefits. Some were supportive. Others questioned whether Earth should be involving itself in conflicts so far from home. Greg stood before the assembled representatives and spoke plainly. "We spent resources on this mission, yes. We lost good people. But we saved hundreds of thousands of innocent lives. We made a strong ally, and we showed the galaxy that humanity stands for something beyond our own interests. But at what cost?" demanded one representative. "How many more times can we afford to launch such massive military operations?" "The cost of doing nothing is higher," Greg replied. "If we ignore calls for help, if we only act when it benefits us directly, what does that say about who we are? We have the power to make a difference. With that power comes responsibility." The debate continued for days. Eventually, the Congress voted to approve increased funding for the military and to establish a rapid response fleet dedicated to humanitarian missions. The Valerian rescue had changed Earth's perspective on its role in the galaxy. Meanwhile, news of what humanity had done was spreading through the galaxy. The story of the Third Fleet's rescue mission was being discussed on 100 different worlds. Reactions were mixed. Some species were impressed. They saw humanity's actions as noble and worthy of respect. They began reaching out to Earth, interested in trade and diplomatic relations. Others were concerned. If humans were willing to travel across the galaxy to fight for strangers, what did that mean for the balance of power? Some aggressive species that had been expanding their territories began to reconsider their plans. And some were critical. They called humanity reckless and dangerous. They said that interfering in the Kretsch attack was destabilizing. They worried about what would happen if humans decided to involve themselves in other conflicts. But the Valerians spoke loudly in humanity's defense. Chancellor Dre gave speeches to the Galactic Assembly, describing what had happened and praising Earth's actions. Other species that had been threatened by aggressive neighbors began to take notice. Within 6 months, Earth had established formal diplomatic relations with 12 new alien civilizations. Trade increased. Cultural exchanges began. Human scientists worked with alien researchers on joint projects. The Valerian rescue had opened doors that had been closed before. Kate Sullivan was promoted to captain and given command of her own company. She used her experience from the Valerian mission to train her new Marines. She emphasized the importance of protecting civilians and fighting with honor. One day during a training exercise, a young Marine asked her a question. "Captain, why do we fight? I mean, really fight? Not just for orders or country, but what is the real reason?" Kate thought about it. She thought about the Valerian children hiding in that basement. She thought about Chancellor Dre's words about compassion and strength. She thought about the responsibility that came with being strong. "We fight to protect those who cannot protect themselves," Kate said finally. "We fight because someone has to stand up to bullies and monsters. We fight because doing nothing when you have the power to help is the same as being part of the problem. Does that answer your question?" The Marine nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am. It does." Back on Valara Prime, the rebuilding continued. With human engineering assistance and resources, the cities were being restored faster than anyone expected. New buildings rose from the ruins. Power grids were rebuilt stronger than before, and for the first time in their history, the Valerians were building a proper military. They did not want to become warriors like humans, but they understood now that peace had to be protected. Human military advisors helped them design a defensive force. Ships were built. Soldiers were trained. The Valerians remained a peaceful people, but they were no longer helpless. Chancellor Dre established an annual holiday called Remembrance Day. On that day, Valerians gathered to remember those lost in the attack. and to honor the humans who had saved them. Statues were built, monuments were erected, and children were taught the story of how humanity had crossed the galaxy to answer their call for help. In the Valerian capital, a large memorial was constructed. It listed the names of every human who had died defending Valara Prime. Next to it stood a statue showing a human marine helping a Valerian child. The inscription at the base read, "When darkness came, they brought light. When death came, they brought hope. We will never forget. On Earth, life continued. The dramatic rescue became history. Children studied it in school. Movies were made about it, but for those who had been there, it remained deeply personal." Jake Matthews was promoted to admiral. He was given command of the new Rapid Response Fleet. His job was to be ready for the next crisis wherever it might occur. He took the responsibility seriously. He knew that somewhere in the galaxy someone might need help. And when they did, Earth would be ready to answer. Samantha Cole continued flying. She trained new pilots, passing on her experience. She told them about the importance of protecting transports, about making every shot count, about bringing your wingman home. She never forgot the pilots who had not made it back from Valara Prime. Dr. Henry Ross became the head of the new Interspecies Medical Research Institute. His job was to combine medical knowledge from different civilizations to advance healing for everyone. The institute became one of the most respected scientific organizations in the galaxy. 1 year after the Valerian rescue, a new distress signal was received. This time it came from a mining colony on the edge of human space. Pirates were attacking. The colony had minimal defenses. The Rapid Response Fleet launched within hours. But they did not go alone. A squadron of Valerian defense ships joined them. Chancellor Dre sent a message with the ships. "You came when we needed help. Now we stand with you." Jake Matthews smiled when he saw the Valerian ships in formation with his fleet. This was what the rescue had been about. Not just saving one civilization, but building bonds of friendship and mutual support. Together, the human and Valerian forces drove off the pirates and saved the colony. It was the beginning of a new era. Humanity was no longer alone in the galaxy. They had friends, allies, and partners. And whenever someone called for help, that call would be answered. On Earth, in her small apartment, Kate Sullivan tucked her daughter into bed. The little girl looked up at her with sleepy eyes. "Mommy, when I grow up, can I help people like you do?" Kate smiled and brushed hair from her daughter's face. "You can do anything you want. You can be a Marine, a doctor, an engineer, or something completely different. Whatever you choose, just remember to help others when you can. That is what makes us human. What makes humans special."